realize that all my dreams are much too far away. Sometimes the nights got me aching, working hours in the cold. And I can't imagine how it feels to end up where you feel you had to go. I'm in love, starving, praying nothing else will go wrong.
Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. It's your old pal Jake, and today I've got a latte. I was watching a channel recently. Thought I'd just start us off with a little back and forth. I was watching a channel recently, which I do intend to feature on here at some point in the near future. Their clips are great. But I had a soul-crushing experience. It's called Black Power Media. They do a live morning show and then a remix later where they clip it out. Very similar to this, only they're capable of sticking to a schedule. And they were talking about latte leftists, and it was devastating to me personally. Because I love me a latte. And I very much have the appearance of the folks that they were talking about. But then they said something that was that kind of wrecked me, which is the purpose of the purpose of the poll that I put up in the chat. I'd love to get your responses, and we'll look at it in a little bit. But comes down to this. They were looking at the anti-war rally that was held recently by Jimmy Dore and a cavalcade of ghouls, including a convicted child molester, a diddler. And they were saying that, and I should be clear, this anti-war rally was in reality just a pro-Putin rally. That was it. But they were saying that these people were leftists. And I have noted that the impression of Jimmy Dore is that he is a leftist by a lot of people on the internet. I was surprised to see people who are genuinely on the left fallen for that, or at least I thought fallen for that. What are your opinions? There's a couple of not just right-wing, but far-right conspiracy nut internet show hosts. For example, the ones in the poll, Dave Rubin and Jimmy Dore, who they pitch themselves as coming from the left and having a left perspective, but they're just not culture warriors or whatever. Do you think they actually are not? Or rather, do you think they are actually lefties? I don't. It's even back when Jimmy Dore was on TYT, God help us. He seemed off to me, and his show quickly devolved into unhelpful left infighting, and then just appealing to a far right audience. Dave Rubin, I wasn't even aware of him when he was on TYT. God help me for that being an organization which has pumped out two of the worst internet personalities. But I never thought Dave Rubin was a lefty in the time I've been aware of him. That said, I mean, how they pitch themselves. So it's worthy of discussion. In the show today, oh boy, we have, of course, democracy on the ballot in 2024. I don't think that'll be a surprise to anyone, but I would want to fill you in on a little bit of recent history that has gone seemingly unnoticed in all this talk of treacherous MAGA folks. Lawrence O'Donnell does a great job talking about the present day, but he has got rose-tinted glasses when it comes to the GOP of old. In fact, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the consent decree that the GOP was under until 2018, from the 80s until 2018, that prevented them from having poll watchers or from posting their own poll watchers because they were trying to interfere with elections. Then nationalist divorcee. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene using the media and American politics as her personal therapy, and it's a little uncomfortable to watch, but it is hilarious. Joy Reid tears her a new one, and it's fantastic. And then Illegally Blonde. Ivanka and Kushner. That's a stretch. Kushner's Sandy Brown at worst. Ivanka and Kushner have been subpoenaed by Special Counsel Jack Smith. Finally, we are seeing members of the Trump family being dragged into court, and I feel the beginning of the end for this guy is very much nigh. I'm excited for it. Well, didn't want to click that. Let's jump into these videos here, because I very much want to talk about Lawrence O'Donnell and the. There we are. Lawrence O'Donnell and the stakes coming up on the next ballot. He quite correctly mentions that it's not really just a matter of whose policy you agree with. It's whether or not you fundamentally agree with the concept of the people's vote choosing our leaders, also known as fundamentally being an American. Here he is.
But first, we're going to widen the focus to what is really at stake in the grand jury's criminal investigation of Donald Trump in Georgia and Jack Smith's two federal grand jury criminal investigations of Donald Trump for possible illegal conduct involving his possession of government documents and possible crimes leading up to and on January 6th. The import of the crimes being investigated in each of those criminal investigations is that any criminal conduct found in the Georgia investigation or in Jack Smith's January 6th investigation weighs heavily on the future of democracy in America. We have, for the last 2 years, been at a tragic political crossroads in this country now that one of the two major political parties no longer believes in democracy as a basic organizing principle of that political party. 139 Republican members of the House of Representatives voted to overturn the last presidential election. They voted to overturn the will of the people, the votes of the people, including the will of the people in their own states in some cases. Each of those Republican members of the House of Representatives were elected in the same election that they voted to overthrow only for the presidential portion of the ballots cast in their states. Everything else on those same ballots, including the vote totals for each of them in their own elections, they accepted as perfectly accurate. A majority of the Republican members of the House of Representatives obliterated any personal attachment to democracy in voting to overthrow the presidential election, and they cast those votes.
Just want to highlight this image right here. Would never, first of all, would never have gotten to that point if it was lefties trying to bust in. Those dudes right there, holding the line, pointing the guns, they wouldn't be hesitating to fire. They'd be emptying the clip, keeping the gun up, putting in a new clip, emptying another one. That's how they treat lefties. That is the difference. Long term, and Jesus God, I want to get this effing Trump guy tossed in prison so we can move on with building a country that functions properly. Long term, once we've dealt with Trump, once we've dealt with his lackeys, which is going to be a multi-year project, but fortunately, once we can ease into this other stuff as we go. What I want to do is work on correcting the major, fundamentally flawed parts of America, such as the right-leaning bias in law enforcement. Not just the judicial system. I mean the law enforcement arm. The guys with guns, in other words. They are both culturally, generally culturally coming from backgrounds where they're happier to do that. They're also conditioned to treat lefties like they are dangerous and right-wingers like they are friends. When in fact, time and time again, we see the exact opposite is true. With a radical leftist, at best, you have someone who is extremely motivated to help people. With a standard right-winger, you have somebody who is likely to full-on try to start up a new civil war. If it's in the form of voting for Donald Trump even, that is trying to start a new civil war, because there it is. The idea that it got to that point should be a lesson in and of itself for all of us at how much work we need to do to get this country functioning properly.
After the Capitol was attacked on January 6th, they cast those votes against democracy after they were in hiding, while the supporters of the man they wanted to be president were attacking the Capitol for him. 8 Republican senators also voted to overturn the presidential election. That number could go up in the House and in the Senate in the next election in 2024. And so in the next election, on election night, American democracy will once again be standing on the edge of disaster. Many Democrats will be running against many Republicans who have already voted against democracy and made it very clear that they do not believe that voters should be allowed to choose the winners of elections if the voters choose a Democrat. This was never true before. We had no reason to think that or say that before Donald Trump became president. And no one did think or say that about the Republican Party before Donald Trump became president.
Everybody hold up. That's not true. Lawrence O'Donnell, I respect this man quite a bit. I respect the journey he's been on from being painfully centrist to the point of wondering if the man was blind or willfully ignorant, to scooching left, or rather I should say scooching left. Scooching left, Lawrence O'Donnell. If the middle, if the middle's here at tie level, he's gone about here. But he's been on a journey, and he's been willing to examine his own beliefs, I think, with open eyes, and I congratulate him for that. But what he just said is not true. We talk about the difference between MAGA and the GOP, and amongst us, amongst people who are going to approach this seriously, yeah, it's worth examining the differences, and there are differences. But the differences that corporate media says exist, they're just not so. The GOP has always been anti-democracy. They have always, the conservatives of America have always been in favor of allowing less people to vote, and they have always been willing to use illegal means to accomplish that. Back before the party switch, when Democrats were the right-wingers, the KKK was a major part of their electoral strategy. Intimidating people at the polls were a major part of their electoral strategy. As late as the 80s, they were in legal trouble for using police officers, off-duty police officers, as poll watchers to intimidate people with guns and all. It was so bad, in fact, and Lawrence, I'm sorry, but we're gonna switch off you here and go to NPR. It was so bad, in fact, that there was a court order put in place that prevented them, the GOP, Republicans, it prevented them from having poll watchers. They weren't allowed to have them because they couldn't be trusted. Have a look. Have a gander here. And I will be attempting, there we are, to interact with a website with a new program. Okay. So this was written in 2018, this article, and it's about the consent decree that had prevented the GOP from posting poll watchers being lifted at the worst possible time, 2018. Okay, so I guess 2020 would have been the worst possible time, but still, a genuinely poorly timed moment for that consent decree to be lifted. A decades-old consent decree has been lifted against the Republican National Committee's so-called ballot security measures. It's a big victory in the Republican National Convention's efforts to monitor polling activity, and it's a sobering moment for activists who fear this could accelerate voter suppression, especially among minorities. Yeah, that's who they tend to lean on. From the transcript, 11 months before Election Day, a federal judge has given the Republican National Committee a big win. He has allowed a consent decree to expire that was in place since 1982. So yeah, early 80s. The agreement prevented the RNC from carrying out what the party said they saw. These are liars. We should really be more comfortable emphasizing that. What the party said they saw as ballot security measures and what critics deemed as voter suppression, because it was. Rick Hassan of the University of California, Irvine, joins us now. He was yada, yada, yada. Okay. The Democrats accused the Republican National Committee of engaging in a number of activities which they said was voter suppression in violation of the Voting Rights Act and other civil rights laws. One thing the RNC was accused of was sending armed police officers who were off duty, so guys with guns, that's all that is. I don't care what their day job is, to polling places to patrol the polling places in minority areas. So they're sending guys with guns to patrol minority areas, to wander around, harassing minority voters. Rather than going to trial, and this is what is key, this is why I keep saying consent decree rather than court ruling. Rather than going to trial, the RNC agreed to settle the case, and it settled the case in what's called a consent decree, which means that the settlement between the parties was embodied in a court order, and if the RNC ever violated that order, they could be found in contempt. And so this was a powerful tool, misspelled there, that the Democrats have been able to use for the last few decades. One other thing. Why is it gone now? Well, so this summer, the guest says, as the Trump campaign started touting problems with voter fraud and trying to, remember, this is back in 2018. And the Republicans are trying to pretend like this guy was ever going to participate fairly in an election. Ridiculous. So this summer, as the Trump campaign started touting problems with voter fraud and trying to collect signatures of people who were going to engage in poll watching on Election Day, Democrats said the Republicans were violating the consent decree. The judge determined that whatever the Trump campaign might have done, It was done without the RNC's cooperation, and therefore the RNC didn't violate it, and the consent decree was allowed to die. So the whole thing was done away with simply because it was violated. By virtue of the fact that they chose to break the law, what happens to break a court order? What happens? What's the consequence? Well, obviously, if it's a Republican breaking the rule, then the rule gets changed. Trump was the leader of the Republican Party. To say that he was not doing this as a Republican is insane. The point is, folks, that there have always been Republicans whose primary goal was and remains to subvert democracy. And if you want to know what you can do about it, it's good that Lawrence O'Donnell is talking about how serious things are now. And it's a big part of the path to victory that we not go easy on MAGA and seditionists, people who are mask-off seditionists. But don't let people forget the lessons we have learned, because otherwise we're going to go right back to USA in the 1990s. In other words, allowing this fascism creep to happen again. We're going to let him get another bite at the apple. Somebody slightly more competent might be the fascist next time, and that'll be that. Mitch McConnell, in terms of policy, is everything Trump is. He's just better at wearing the mask, better at pretending like there's a political reasoning behind what he's doing, rather than distracting a rabid fan base so that he can rob us all. But it's the same thing. So don't let people whitewash GOP history. They have been against democracy for as long as I've been on this good earth. And they're dangerous, and we need to take that seriously. Probably. There we are. Hey. So, have a look at these comments in the poll. Oh, thank God. So we've got the poll was, which of these people do you consider to be a leftist? Jimmy Dore, Dave Rubin, or neither? 100% of people voted neither. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. That makes me happy, because I was real concerned that people would be like, oh, I think Jimmy's kind of left. Good. All right, so I'm not taking crazy pills. Catherine Wolf says, hit the like button. Folks, yes, please. I appreciate that very much, Catherine. What they do is even more dangerous than being a blatant fascist. Yes, wholeheartedly agreed. Come on, peeps, let's get the algorithm to push wicked. Hit the like button. Hell yeah. John Norris, do you think Trump is going to jail, and if so, for what? Also says, John Norris also says, I'm 44 and the Republicans have hurt this country the most. Yeah, they have. They have been, I'm not saying Democrats are angels. I'm not even saying, you know what? Go as far left as you want. Take any lefty politician. None of them, in my opinion, are perfect either. But I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for people with a genuine interest in trying to make the country better. It's one of the reasons I do eventually want to do left versus left debates. Friendly, with the goal of promoting both channels, a handshake and smiles, but in actual politics, you should be disagreeing with people. That's almost fundamental to making it work, because otherwise, how do you get to the best, the best policy? But we're dealing, you're quite right, we're dealing with something entirely different in Republicans. They are consistently hurting the country, and their policies are not designed to do anything but that. It's to drain it. Now, you said, do you think Trump is going to jail, and if so, for what? I'm going to give you a little taste of Salty Saturday right now. You're going to get a bonus. And it's going to take me one moment, but I believe it'll be worth it. I said on a previous stream that I want to just do a marathon where I'm listing all of Trump's crimes that he has not seen consequences for yet. Just all of his crimes that we know of, at least since he started campaigning. How many do you think it is? Let me ask you this, John. How many crimes do you think there would be? 10, 15, 17, 22, 30? 56 is the answer, at least according to Citizens for Ethics, who counted them up, listed them out. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you what he is not going to be charged for, because the deadline to file charges has passed. He won't be charged for campaign finance crimes and the resulting cover-up when he used Michael Cohen in 2015 to make an unlawful individual contribution. Campaign finance crimes and cover-up when Donald J. Trump for President LLC did not report AMI's contribution. In other words, the Karen McDougal story. Bear in mind, Michael Cohen went to prison for this. Donald Trump won't. Deadline is passed. You want the good stuff, though? You want what I actually think he's going to... So my answer, though, despite that, my answer is yes, I think he's going to go to prison. Yeah, I think he is going to be convicted. I think he is going to be indicted. I think he is going to be tried and convicted. I can't fathom them actually sending a rich white ex-president to prison. I can't fathom that. But the crimes I do think he is going to get convicted for will be the obstruction of justice in regards to the documents. The classified documents, the election interference in 2020, and I worry that I'm wrong about this, but the optimist in me believes that the interference and attempt to bribe or extort Ukraine, President Zelensky, I think that is going to result in charges. Dawned on me said Trump will never get sent to jail. There will be no perp walk. Sorry, guys, just isn't happening. I hope you're wrong, and it would not surprise me if you're right. God, I hope it doesn't pan out that way. But we can put our thumb on the scale there by staying informed and riding the Justice Department's butt on this. Speaking of, man, that's a transition. So Marjorie Taylor Greene's going through some things, folks. She's having a rough couple of years. Recently, I think she's in the middle of a divorce, but she chose the most awkward language to discuss doing a good old-fashioned new Confederacy, and here's Joy Reid relentlessly mocking her.
So the very bad map we see at every presidential election showing huge swaths of red, I mean, it's flawed and a myth because land doesn't vote, people do. The reality is we are a nation not divided by states, but rather by counties. It's one reason Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for secession.
I'm going to let Joy Reid do her thing because she's got a great speech here, but I do want to look at that map again real quick.
I mean, it's flawed and a myth because land doesn't vote, people do. The reality is we are a nation not divided.
Yeah, that is one of the worst pieces of propaganda we really should. Oh my God, it was MIT, USA Today analysis. Okay, it's just poor presentation because it does such a bad job of showing the reality. All right, I'm off my soapbox.
By states, but rather by counties. It's one reason Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for secession isn't just inconceivable as well as foolish. It would be disastrous for Republican voting states. An analysis of the 2020 election by the Brookings Institution showed that Biden's winning base in 500 counties, just 500 counties, encompassed 71% of America's economic activity, while Trump's losing base of 2,500 counties represented just 29% of the economy. And that's because blue states tend to be urban and suburban with large populations, while red counties tend to be smaller, more rural, and sometimes with more cows and corn stalks than people. Economically, it's not even a fair fight. Joining me now are MSNBC political analysts Matthew Dowd and Cornell Belcher. And Matthew, I want to go to you first. This sort of fetish for secession, I remember Sarah Palin's husband was sort of indulging in it. These red state folks keep saying it, but they don't understand the economics of it would really be awful for red states. The states that are the most dependent on the federal government to keep their economies alive are almost all red states: Alaska, Mississippi, Kentucky, West Virginia, Montana, New Mexico, Arizona, Louisiana, Indiana, Alabama. Only New Mexico is a blue state. The least federally dependent states, almost all blue states. Blue states are the donor states: California, Colorado, Massachusetts, you can go on, Illinois, Delaware, New Jersey, et cetera. Why do they keep indulging in this?
Because they don't care about the economic implications of it. I mean, I think that's fundamental to what they're doing and what they've not done in Washington, D.C. What they care about is the cultural implications of this. That's what they fundamentally care about, because they have a singular culture they want to establish. And since they can't do it as the United States as a whole, they want to do it state by state.
We are in a culture war because their culture is trash. Not people from red states, not people from Trump voting areas. The Trump voters have a trash culture. And I just mean, if you poke around, from time to time, God help me, I got to get my hands dirty and hang out in these crowds to talk to them. Without fail, it's the same jokes over and over. My pronouns are gun, truck. I don't know why I did Hank Hill just then, but Hank would never be a MAGA voter, per Mike Judge's say-so. But, yeah, they do the same jokes over and over, and it's all based around pushing others down, not building anything up. And if there's lip service paid to building something up, it's usually something not tangible, like praise for Jesus Christ. Look, if you enjoy Jesus Christ, cool. Good on you. But that's not like there's not a chart for that, you know? And they don't underestimate what a powerful thing it is. Because notice what Joy Reid said in the early part of that. I'm not going to go back to the whole thing. I'm just going to move this slightly off. 70% of the wealth is coming from blue voting areas. How does that? We know the reality. We know that a lot of that wealth is tied up with people that then turn around and donate it to both parties, but more so to Republicans. But how does it look if you don't really follow politics and you don't dive into this regularly? And in fact, when you do dive into it, you only get a bunch of conspiracy nonsense. How does it look to somebody in a red area? It does look like wealthy elites. When they look at that garbage map, I will go back to the part we were at, but when they look at that garbage map, oh, steady hand. And they are aware of some number like there's 70% of the wealth tied up in the blue areas, and then they get another sheet that shows them, for example, like I've presented to you, that the richest among us now hold a greater share of the wealth. The conclusion they arrive at is the kind of conspiracy nonsense that we have to constantly fight against. Like there's a cabal of yada, yada, yada. That's why that kind of conspiracy is able to grow. We are going to, unfortunately, have to fight nonsense with facts, but they are not going to hear anything we have to say until they have seen people suffer consequences for their actions. Because right now they see that, and when a lefty starts talking, they shut down entirely.
Blue states. Blue states are the donor states. California, Colorado, Massachusetts, you can go on, Illinois. Why do they care
about the economic implications of it? I mean, I think that's fundamental to what they're doing and what they've not done in Washington, D.C. What they care about is the cultural implications of this. That's what they fundamentally care about, because they have a singular culture they want to establish. And since they can't do it as the United States as a whole, they want to do it state by state. The other thing,
and there is my point. They care about the culture because that's what they're trained to do. That's how that's the fight the GOP is comfortable with their voters having. Because cultural things are harder to pin down, they're harder to measure. And you can take something, I just bit the hell out of my tongue. And you could take something like that map and turn it into a culture war real easy.
Found it peculiar that she used this term divorce in this process. And sometimes, as we know, that in a divorce, sometimes the person falls in love with somebody else or another individual and wants out. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene has fallen in love with another country. That happens to be Russia in the course of this. And she likes what's going on in Russia far more than what she likes going on here in the United States. She likes Putin's brand of leadership far more than she likes Joe Biden's brand of leadership.
Maybe more than she likes Trump's brand of leadership.
And so that's what I think this is fun. It's a cultural, this is not an economic concern of theirs. This is a cultural concern of theirs. And it fundamentally doesn't understand what it means to be in the United States of America. United States of America. They have no concept of what this means in history. And to me, the shots at Fort Sumter that started the Civil War, we're long past that here in this country right now, because they've jumped already to the place where they want a separate country so they can establish their cultural monotheistic way they want in America.
It's rare that I temper something that somebody on corporate media said, but nah. I mean, okay, maybe you could call January 6th the Fort Sumter. But was it really? It was I feel like that's a bit much.
But I mean, there are a couple ironies here, Cornell. Number one, they would be ruling a country that would still be substantially black. And since we know anti-woke just means anti-black, what would they do with those poor people who'd be stuck there in their world if you really separated it? And number two, by their own definition, their states are takers. They claim they don't like the federal government and they don't like takers. Their own states are wholly dependent on the federal government for survival. So by their own metrics, they're already the ones who are in the moral wrong.
Well, it's absurd, Joy. And I think what they would have to do is, quite frankly, what they're already doing in many of these red states, and that is making it harder and harder for people of color to vote and to have political power. Right. You know, my father and my family is from rural North Carolina. And one thing my father and always talked about was growing up is that, you know, in the South, blacks and whites could always get along. It would just became a problem when blacks wanted power. And I think that that continues to be true right now, is that you would have to see even more draconian measures to sort of disenfranchise and take away black political power, even more so than you do right now. But let's take this out. Let's push this out further. Is that, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is and many of her friends, you know, with all due respect, they're not even Republicans anymore. They're Confederates.
Yeah.
You know, I went back for the State of the Union. I went back and looked at State of Union speeches by presidents, and even Ronald Reagan talked about the ideal of Republicans and Democrats have to get together to move a legislation that benefits all of America and put aside partisanship.
Okay, so I love this guy. He's more or less on a roll. One bump in the road that I want to correct. As we just went over, Ronald Reagan spoke to those things, but that is just the mask. 1982 is when that consent decree was put in place. Reagan was every bit as for every shady tactic as possible. He was just a better salesman to the general public. He was better at convincing folks in the suburbs that they weren't voting against black people's interests necessarily if they were voting Republican. I think it is obvious now. I think at this point in history, now if you walk into the ballot booth and you vote for R under that column, you have to do so knowing that you are choosing to harm black people in exchange for whatever you think you're going to benefit for that vote. And by the way, you're not going to get the benefit that you think you are for that vote. But even if you do, at this point, there is no way you can do that without acknowledging that the exchange is you are also harming black folks. Plain and simple. But it has always been that way. 100% of the GOP's existence has been detrimental to black folks.
This is not even a party of Ronald Reagan anymore. This is no longer what I could see as a legitimate Republican Party. When you start talking about
detrimental to black folks and also seditionists,
dividing the country up and breaking the country up, you're a Confederate. You're no longer a Republican.
You know what's interesting, though, Matthew, my poor team has been forced to hear about this all day, but I feel like what's happening is sort of a coddling of the conservative mind. The conservatives don't have the confidence that their ideas can be sold on the basis of presenting them just as ideas. And so they've decided we can't convince people to do what we want and to live by our particular religious dictums. So we're going to tell the federal government, enforce it. I don't like this book, ban it. I don't like drag shows, make them illegal. The things that I personally feel uncomfortable with, I don't feel confident that I can convince people to come to my side. So I need the power of the federal government to ban the things that make me uncomfortable. That to me strikes me as a sort of intellectual collapse and a sense of defeat.
Well, Joy, I'm really glad you brought this point up because I've been thinking about this a lot, all of us have been observers or in politics for decades in this course of this. I can't remember a time when one political party or the leaders of the political party abandoned persuasion.
Yeah.
Abandon persuasion as a mode of leadership. What they've decided is, just like you said, they can't persuade a majority of America to move in a certain direction, which is where they want to go, which is my view, and I've said this before, is a form of Christian nationalism they want to establish here. So
it's not just his view. It's it's what they've stated. Marjorie Taylor Greene has stated it. Tucker Carlson, propagandist for the GOP and MAGA, has spoken out in favor of Christian nationalism. It's out there. He doesn't have to say, this is my opinion. That's a statement of fact, my friend.
So what they do is, since they can't persuade and they no longer want to persuade, they go to force. And every single leader that's emerged, Donald Trump, DeSantis, others, it's not an art of persuasion. It's an art of force. And that's where we are. And when you when you abandon persuasion and you go to force, then democracy is frayed and is broken. And when your major political party no longer believes in persuasion.
Yeah. When a major political party no longer believes in persuasion, what's the answer? Make that political party no longer major. Kick them out. You got to talk to your GOP friends. There's a couple of ways we are going to chip away at the Republican Party. Look at the Republican Party as two factions, GOP which were the and now I'm talking about voters. So let me be very specific here. GOP voters, who were the soccer moms who didn't really pay attention to politics that closely, watched Fox News occasionally, and believed that they were voting for fiscal responsibility when they voted for Republicans. To be clear, they also have never been good with money because their goal has been to bleed America for their own profit. So, of course, they weren't good with money. But the GOP voters who bought that as a concept, we will be siphoning off them by highlighting this for them. If you are voting for Republicans, you are voting against America. You're voting against the United States. Literally, United States. You are voting against that. Make sure they know that. Doesn't matter if it's a soft-spoken, sort of middle of the road, slightly right-leaning, yada yada yada. If you are giving them votes in Congress, control over a state, control over a school board, you are putting your vote towards making your vote irrelevant. Approach GOP voters like that. That would scare them. It should scare them because it's true. MAGA, we've talked about in other streams, and it's less relevant here. MAGA, you approach it from attacking the oligarchy, but that is a conversation for another time. If you've got reasonable Republican voters in your life and you want to sway them away from voting against democracy, A, you can show them that clip. B, you can show them this. I do want Joy to. Yeah, let's just go to this. You can show them this right chaw. States most dependent on the federal government. I have a link to this article. It breaks it down. But here they are. The darker blue, ironically, I wish they hadn't done that. Darker blue represents more dependency. And wouldn't you have a gander? I want to point out, look how dark, green, sort of halfway in between Michigan is. Bear in mind, Michigan was horribly gerrymandered until 2018. This data, I believe, goes up till 2019, 2021, somewhere in there. Michigan will. If you keep watching this, it will lighten and lighten and lighten as time goes on because the state is no longer gerrymandered. Show this to the GOP voters that believe it's the party of fiscal responsibility. Show this to the folks that believe Republicans run things better. They don't. Demonstrably, they don't.
They're like missionaries. They're like religious missionaries who use torture as their form of conversion.
Inquisition.
Because they actually
They're more
don't
like
have
crusaders.
enough.
They're more
like
like
the crusaders. Absolutely. And Cornell, that is the one way to turn even more people away.
We need to come up with a less cool word, though, than crusaders, because they don't have that cool knight credibility. F crusaders, for the record, but still.
Oh, I think this is when she said that, and when the Republican leadership roundly did not come out and condemn it, I thought, my God, and I hate to think this way, but it's also, Joy, a political opportunity. Because look, there's a whole amount of research that some that I've been involved with that shows Americans are actually really concerned about another civil war in this country. And they don't want another civil war in this country. And the vast, vast majority of Americans still hold on to the hope that even as divided as we are, we have more in common than not, and that we are stronger together. And I like the ideal of Joe Biden going into re-election as standing, and by the way, his speech that he gave in Eastern Europe, I thought was brilliant, because he talked about democracy, and he talked about standing up for democracy, and he talked about taking on the autocrats. And if this Confederate party that is now emerging on the right is going to be the party of Putin and autocracy and democracy, they are handing Joe Biden and Republicans an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to break it to Marge, but her state would be with the union. Has she been to Atlanta lately? Y'all state ain't a red state no more, Mama.
She's going to be one of the children. She's going to be one of the children that's divorced, left without a home.
Left without a listen. Matthew Dowd and Cornell Belcher, thank you both very much.
So, in short, as they concluded themselves in the end there, and I should have given them more faith, it is a political opportunity. And you shouldn't say, I feel bad about this, but it's a political opportunity. No, it's a political opportunity because the truth is apparent. The neat thing about this, let me tell you in one sentence my political journey. In college, I thought I might be a libertarian. And then I looked at how that's worked out. No libertarian policy has ever been good. In the United States, libertarian means something very different. The left wing lives in the realm of facts. And we do get political opportunities every time right-wingers step too far and give us an opportunity to present facts to make a case. They've done that here. It's real easy. Just make it clear to those soccer moms that we got to convince to stop voting against their own interests, against everybody's interests. Just make it clear to them what is at stake and what they can do about it. I think we're going to find within the next decade that the conservatives are now Democrats and the progressives are the new lefties. We're going to be taking refugees from the GOP because it cannot continue now that America has, to their chagrin, woken up. Catherine Wolf said, I think Trump may be indicted, but he'll never go to jail. Bad boy ankle bracelet only. Oh, you're right. And they're going to let him be visited by all kinds of seditionists, and they're going to let him keep giving interviews. Part of the reason I want him to actually be in prison is because it's a lot harder to call into Fox News when Warden's got to let you put a couple quarters in a payphone to do so. Trump will be nominated. Dawned on me says Trump will be nominated as Republican nominee, and all indictments will be put on hold. Oof. I don't think so, personally. I certainly hope not. I think 10 years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. But there are the efforts of folks just like you, writing the DOJ constantly, writing these news organizations constantly, watching left-wing media. Those efforts have made it clear that America is actually paying attention now, and that old playbook does not work anymore. Dawned on Me says, are we sure MTG even graduated 6th grade? I'm older, but even I know what happened before the Civil War, during the Civil War, and after the Civil War. Do bear in mind, Marjorie Taylor Greene does not care about what is real. Perhaps worthy of its own video, but Bo of the Fifth Column also did a take on this, and he was explaining what a country, what this hypothetical country she was talking about would look like, and it would be a country which makes its money off of its natural resources and sells them to countries that have more money. Well, if you divide up those areas, who's the country that's got more money? The blue states. It would essentially be Saudi Arabia. They don't believe in having rights for their people. They believe in fascism and autocracy. And so what would you get? You would get a country that is very much like America's, the countries America has turned less powerful countries into. The irony is staggering. There we are. Well, I'm going to do a proper intro to this. Here it is. But I'm calling this segment Illegally Blonde. So, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner have been subpoenaed to testify about the coup. Finally, folks, we are getting closer to the moment we have all been waiting for. I am going to let my man Glenn Kirshner talk about this because he gives a fantastic introduction, and then let's just drink this tea together and enjoy it. This is one where we don't have to do a whole lot other than giggle like school children.
So, friends, it's pretty clear. Special Counsel Jack Smith is getting after it.
What an opening. I love it.
Hey, all. Glenn Kirshner here. So, friends, Special Counsel Jack Smith continues to move at light speed. You know, he seems to have a real take no prisoners approach to investigating. Well, that is, until he begins taking prisoners.
Yeah, my beef with the DOJ in general has been that failure to take prisoners. Interesting choice of words.
Here is the new reporting in the New York Times. Headline, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump subpoenaed in January 6 investigation. Former President Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka and his son-in-law Jared Kushner have been subpoenaed by the special counsel to testify before a federal grand jury about Mr. Trump's efforts to stay in power after he lost the 2020 election and his role in a pro-Trump mob's attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. The decision by the special counsel, Jack Smith, to subpoena Ms. Trump and Mr. Kushner underscores how deeply into Mr. Trump's inner circle Mr. Smith is reaching and is the latest sign that no potential high-level witness is off limits. Both Jared and Ivanka testified before the January 6th House Select Committee, appearing for videotaped interviews in which both provided memories about the day, January 6th. The committee, in turn, repeatedly played clips of their testimony at some of its public hearings. One clip that got considerable attention showed Ms. Trump making clear that she accepted Attorney General Bill Barr's declaration that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in the election, despite Mr. Trump's repeated claims otherwise. Mr. Trump was infuriated by the clips and what was said in them, according to people in contact with him. Friends, think about this. Jack Smith was appointed special counsel just about 3 months ago now, November 18th. And already he has subpoenaed a former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. He subpoenaed a former Chief of Staff to the President of the United States, Mark Meadows. He subpoenaed Donald Trump's former White House counsel.
So if you want to know why I dislike Merrick Garland so much, it's the praise being given to Jack Smith right now. I'll tell you, the fact that you might say, like, all right, Jake, are you satisfied with 3 months that it took to get all these subpoenas? Kind of. Because there's no good answer to why that should be. Either he had a bunch of work to do because the work wasn't already done after 2 years. After 2 years, the work wasn't already done. Or he did take a nearly complete, I would hope, case and then took 3 months to get to the point of issuing subpoenas for these people. What I would have hoped to see is that Merrick Garland had the case more or less complete, and then he handed it off to Jack Smith to say, all right, you do all the public-facing stuff now. because there cannot be even an appearance of yada, 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 yada. But what we learn here is that, more likely, Jack Smith is actually going to work. He's actually doing what we were hoping that Garland would have been doing since day one on the job. So, yes, good for Jack Smith, but equally so bad for Garland. I'm feeling a lot of anger right now. So I hesitate to make to stand by this declaration, let's say. But my instinct is to say that forget politics for just a moment. Deal with truth and acknowledge the fact that Merrick Garland is not a very good attorney general. And at some point, he's got to be replaced. And I would hope that he takes the dignified route. And as soon as these charges get issued, as soon as the case gets started, he announces that he's going to step down and hand it off to somebody else. Let somebody else do the job. Because he's got to go.
Former deputy White House
I don't trust
counsel. He has subpoenaed a number of Donald Trump's criminal defense attorneys, and now he's subpoenaed Trump's daughter and son-in-law. And when Ivanka, for example, is presented to the grand jury investigating the crimes of her daddy, Jack Smith will get to quiz her, question her, grill her on topics such as the following. Remember this from the January 6th Select Committee hearings? Ivanka Trump recalls father's final January 6th call with Mike Pence. "You're a wimp." Ivanka told her chief of staff on the morning of January 6th that she heard her dad have an unsettling conversation with Pence during which he called him a pussy. And friends, let me tell you, putting that kind of evidence before the grand jury, investigating Donald Trump's responsibility for the insurrection, for the deadly attack on the Capitol, is a big deal. Why is it a big deal? Because Donald Trump's own daughter is going to present sharply incriminating testimony, proving that her father was waging a pressure campaign against his own vice president, trying to get him to join Trump's conspiracy, trying to get him to commit a number of federal felonies. Donald Trump was berating and belittling and pressuring and threatening and mocking and deriding his own vice president, trying to convince him to go to the Capitol on January 6th and violate the law, violate the Electoral Count Act. Donald Trump was trying to convince his vice president to go to the Capitol and obstruct the official proceedings, a federal felony, the official proceedings of Congress certifying the election win of Joe Biden. And when your own daughter, your own blood, testifies against you, what, is she going to be accused of having a bias against Donald Trump? That is going to be some of the most powerful, some of the most sharply incriminating testimony, and it's going to come from his own daughter.
Ivanka has always been a rhino. She's been a never-Trumper from the start. She is basically a Democrat. She's basically a Democrat.
He's got a point. It's going to be real powerful when Ivanka has to go up and say what she said to the January 6th committee, to the judge, to the jury. Real powerful. If she somehow gets out of doing that, which it's not crazy to think. I would go so far as to say it wouldn't even be corrupt if she got out of doing that. Wouldn't even be corrupt. To say that you're not going to testify against your father in a court of law, okay. But she complicated it because the J6 committee, probably because they had some cutthroat GOP folks on their side, took advantage of the fact that right-wingers are going to right-wing. They will stab each other in the back or the front or wherever to save themselves. And that is exactly what Ivanka Trump did. She covered her butt. And I think she did the right thing, by the way, by talking to the committee. I just think her motivation had nothing to do with what was good for the country. Of course not. Of course not. Now Jack Smith has that tool in his toolkit. And it's going to be just amazing watching the next couple of months of how this unfolds. What can you do about it? I would say, in this case, for this specific development, there's nothing we have to do. But be wary. There has been expressed already in the comments of this stream a distrust, an incredulity about the actual punishment Trump will face. I don't think I'm going to have to encourage you guys to watch the developing trial, but just for the record, do watch the trial as it develops. Because we are going to have to know what we're talking about in that time in between when the trial the presenting of evidence concludes and a sentence is given, punishment is issued. I think demonstrations in the streets saying things like jail time for real crime, chants like that, are going to be necessary because we know how this works. You understand it. I'm delighted to see that. A lot of other Americans understand it too. It's going to be laid bare for people how guilty this man is, how bad his crimes were. As we said earlier in the stream, 56 likely crimes committed between 2015 and now. We are going to have to make a show at that point. Not now, but at that point, we're going to have to make a show of how fed up we are. It's going to have to be the sort of thing that ABC has to report about. Because otherwise, there is the risk of the establishment folks who are in power now thinking that they can get away with the same practices that they have been using for all of American history until this point, which is attempting to let powerful people get away with anything. Let us hope. Let us hope that we are successful in our efforts. I think we will be. Dawned on me said, it's good to know that Trump's family has been fractured as well as so many other families. Yeah. Yeah. I have no further comment. I think you are quite correct. I wish every heartache that he has inflicted on others right back on him. And that's the meanest thing I can say about the guy, and by God, he's earned it. Well, I had a blast here today, folks. Thank you for joining me. We got a show, of course, tomorrow, and then we'll be, I believe, we're going to be showing more of our interview with the True North Eager Beaver podcast. Really enjoy those guys. We also have another interview booked. So we are rolling out WYCD interviews more and more. I hope you'll stay tuned for that. We are anticipating releasing more of the True North Eager Beaver podcast interview on Friday as part of the show. I hope you'll join me there. And then on Salty Saturday, we are going through the 56 crimes, 45s, 56. We are going through that on Salty Saturday because there's usually not that many angry comments. But if there are any, I will certainly include those as well and be very petty about it. for the purposes of entertainment. I had a blast with y'all. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, do you even love me anymore? Are you in or are you out? What are you here for? They ask me if I'm finished, but I'll tell you one more. Baby, this is all I got. Give me one encore.
Yeah, there's certain things that I can't accept. I blame pride. No, this ain't the type of tape you eject. It's straight fire. No, this ain't to say I'm facing regret. At the same time, it's like think back to the day that we met. I mean, I hate to admit crime, hate to admit lie, hate to admit buying the fact that the flames die. Made up my damn mind to fix it, I've been trying. 1 minute we're all fine until we go offline. Yeah, fuck it up, baby, like it was the first time. Yeah, pucker up, girl, we made it through the worst times. Yeah, suck it up.